Hey everyone, I'm Graham Strang. Welcome to a new episode of my vlog. Today, I'm going to be doing an episode that I've wanted to do for a long time. I'm here in the Sapperton neighborhood of New Westminster, British Columbia, where I used to go to school at Douglas College a few years ago, and I used to take this SkyTrain to get there. Now, if you know me, you'll know that I love old historic and cool buildings. So you can imagine my surprise when I was just taking this here SkyTrain and I went by this. I was floored. What on earth would there be an old castle here for? What could it be? It's got this massive entrance and staircase. Had to have been something important, and plus I know this city is full of history. So I looked it up. This is the gatehouse to the British Columbia Penitentiary. The BC Penitentiary goes back to the early days of this province. British Columbia became a province of Canada in 1871. And at that time, there were no penitentiaries in Canada west of Manitoba. Because the Canadian Pacific Railway wasn't really completed yet, they really needed a place to host some of the more dangerous criminals. There wasn't really any sort of maximum security facility in the area. So they spent the next several years constructing the British Columbia Penitentiary, and here it opened in 1878. I was very excited when I got here to notice that these stairs are actually open. I explored this once before, long before I had the vlog, and these were all roped off and in rough shape. But this would be where they would have taken prisoners as well as visiting dignitaries and stuff like that back in the heyday of the prison. Now, the penitentiary was here for over 100 years, from 1878 through to when it closed and was decommissioned in 1980. A few remnants, like this incredible castle, are still left here, and I can totally see why they wouldn't want to demolish this. It is currently a restaurant, which appears to be open. Hard to tell. It's currently a restaurant, and I believe also a daycare. And it used to be that it was attached to the massive penitentiary walls, which have long since been demolished. Wonder what the significance of this one differently painted window is, if anything. Fascinating. What a fascinating old building. As you can see, they've turned this side into a restaurant, but still pretty cool. I wonder how long this desk has been here. Still pretty cool to be inside this 140-year-old building. Very cool. I don't dare go upstairs because I don't want to be yelled at. Now I'm on the other side of the gatehouse, which would have put me on penitentiary land before it was taken down completely, like I said, in the early 1980s. Crazy to think how much has changed here in 40 short years. Here we have a historical plaque, not to the penitentiary itself, but just for the city of New Westminster itself. It's just crazy to think that for over 100 years, where I'm standing was within the walls of a maximum security penitentiary. Fun fact, I recently learned that underneath this gatehouse / castle, still to this day, lies a network of tunnels, which are therefore right under my feet as I speak. A series of tunnels and jail cells underneath in the basement to this building that are still accessible today. Now, I'm not going to explore those because, because I'm not an urban exploration channel. I like to stay within the confines of the law wherever possible. And Maybe I'll email the facility at some point asking if they'd let me do a tour. One YouTube channel called Cold Spotters Vancouver did a fantastic video where they did just that. They got permission to take a tour of the underground facility, so I highly suggest you check out their video, which I will link to in the description, which gives just an awesome look at the underground series of tunnels and jail cells forgotten to time. The BC Penitentiary, when it first opened, was a fairly small facility, but over the course of the first 30 years of its existence, it grew to host something like 700 prisoners at its peak. Although it was only designed to hold 300, it broke its capacity by a fair bit. Back in the 1930s, the government began incarcerating mass amounts of people from the Doukhobors organization, now I'm probably butchering that name, which quickly caused an overflow of prisoners, too many to be hosted by this facility, so a separate one was built in the Gulf Islands to accommodate all those prisoners. But this was the highest security institution in Canada for over a century. Or in Western Canada, sorry. So cool. I recently learned that this building is actually not one of the original prison structures. It was actually added in 1931. So still very old and historic, but not original to the penitentiary grounds. I'm walking by Minor Street here in what is now a standard suburban little housing complex. The reason that this street is called Minor Street is that when they were building this housing complex, they decided to name this street after one of the most notorious prisoners to ever spend time here at the penitentiary. I'm referring, of course, to Billy Miner, who was a train robber back in the turn of the last century. He was sentenced to 25 years at BC Penn back in 1907, and apparently broke out one short year later. But for 1 year, he did spend time here on this penitentiary grounds. By the 1970s, though, the penitentiary was well known for not only being just old and out of date, but also being the site of many violent uprisings and riots from the 1950s onwards, including some highly publicized and gruesome hostage takings. And yeah, the last few years of the penitentiary that once stood here were marred by controversy. But yeah, in 1980, after 102 years, they closed the penitentiary and demolished pretty much all remnants that were once within the walls of the penitentiary, all except for this. This is the original prison center block, which housed cells where prisoners stayed for over a century, and it is the only surviving 1878 building here on property. You can go inside, however, it is private property. It is all office buildings now, and I have wandered into it before, but I got some weird looks. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not an urban exploration channel, so I try to stay within the lines of the law wherever possible, and I don't want to be arrested for trespassing. But my goodness, is this building just an incredible sight to behold. You imagine all of the prisoners that would have been kept here and how horrible the living conditions likely would have been inside of this very building. Something tells me that this is the original main entrance. It would certainly make sense This is now a private entrance only, and there is a plaque on the wall designating this as a heritage building for the city of New Westminster. To my knowledge, it's not a federal or provincial heritage building, which means I guess technically there's nothing stopping anyone from taking this building down. Look at that beautiful rainbow in the distance, contrasted with the horrifying 19th century prison building. But yeah, this building, like I said, is all still used as offices, so this is as far in as I'm gonna go, but it's all clearly very modern in here. But there is something chilling about entering this building. There's also a beautiful little trail that goes right along the Fraser River here. And, well, I'm not just showing this trail for its beauty. Don't you worry. I, as usual, am doing this walk in the name of history. This is the coal house. One more little remnant of the penitentiary left standing. There's one of the few actual signs commemorating the penitentiary that I've seen so far. I don't know if this is an original 1878 building or not, but it's very old regardless. I have read that it wasn't necessarily this dock, but right here there was a dock where they would, especially in the days before flight became more viable, this would be where they would bring the prisoners. Can you imagine being a prisoner taken by boat here and having to go up the stairs of doom to meet your fate? It must have been terrifying. It's so cool that this old relic of the penitentiary stands here as well after all these years. I'm so glad it's still here. For some reason I was thinking that I had read something about this building being demolished, but nope. Still here all these decades later. This is interesting. You can actually see into the windows. I have no clue what, if anything, this building is used for now. It must be used for something, as it is, well, I mean, they have security, but I'm sure even if it wasn't occupied, they'd like to have that. Oh, there's boats in here. That's fascinating. Don't know if you could tell. It would appear that they're building boats in here in various stages of completion. So, I suppose some sort of private enterprise has taken up this building. That's fascinating. I'm heading over to visit another area of the old penitentiary grounds, and I can't help but notice these bricks here down 4th Street. Was this originally a brick road? It's just so bizarre to me how the bricks seem to just end in random places, taper off only to reappear over here in a small chunk, down this. Again, this is a very old and historic town. That's odd. Just odd. Update, I looked it up. This area used to be, as I thought, paved with bricks. And whereas most of the streets here have been just paved over, this one still retains a couple of the remnants from the original brick. Cool. This carries on for a few blocks down the street, by the way. Cool. On the opposite side of the ravine from the penitentiary, this is the Glenbrook Ravine, which exists along the border of the penitentiary. I have ventured over to the other side. They buried bodies of the deceased in unmarked, numbered graves right here, under the numbers that they were assigned as prisoners. This is my first time I've ever been able to find this graveyard here. Some of the plots are a lot older than others. Look at this. The number has vanished from this one. Let's see. It's like you have to read it like Braille. 3, 4, 4, 8. That's probably, I would imagine, one of the earlier ones. Now, this graveyard was used until the end of the penitentiary's history in 1980, so some of these are more relatively recent, and some of them just are not. 7226, 8139, all on this small little property alongside this, like I said, totally residential neighborhood. I wonder how many people walk by this and don't even stop to read this. Now, I know that a lot of the records were vanished and or were destroyed over the years, but slowly people have pieced together the stories and the names and dates of the people that were buried here. Here's an interesting picture of the whole site. There is the gatehouse we saw. Down here is the coal house we saw. Over here, this is the center block that we saw before. One of the oldest buildings in the penitentiary. And we are now across this ravine over here in the graveyard. Wow, I was talking about all the atrocities that these people probably committed, but then again, for example, buried here is an inmate who stole $15 worth of socks. Whoa. Perhaps these people deserve a proper headstone after all. And here is plot 1948, the oldest grave of all of these. It is the grave of Gim, is the only name that is given, although it does say AKA Kim or Ung Wing. So 105 years since this person was buried. Back when I used to go to Douglas College, I explored the penitentiary grounds and tried really hard to find this graveyard, and I was unsuccessful. And I was totally curious as to how I could have missed it, being right here. But apparently this area was largely forgotten and ignored until 2016, 1 year after I left the university, when they erected this memorial here and opened this area up to the public. So good going by them to do that. I'm very excited that they did this, giving at least some attempt of remembering these prisoners. Through their diligent work, we have been able to find out the identities of pretty much every single person buried here, except, intriguingly enough, this one. Prisoner 9391 remains unknown to this day. No one is quite sure who is buried here. Similarly, here at grave 9511, it also says the identity of this person remains unknown, although we do know of a potential surname of Wickman. I fail to understand why someone would litter here in the back corner of a gravesite. And like I said, I know these were prisoners, but come on, guys. Ugh. I totally fail to understand why someone who stole $15 worth of socks, even with what $15 would have been worth back then, why would they be incarcerated in the most maximum security installation in Western Canada? I have no idea. Also, 5 Doukhobor inmates were buried here who were charged with public nudity as part of one of the many Doukhobor protests way back when. Amazing. Look at this picture of the center block that we previously saw in 1877 while it was being built. Amazing. This is interesting. I read online that the gatehouse building was actually built in 1931, but here it is in an overhead view from 1928. It would appear either my source was mistaken or this picture's date is incorrect. Those of you who may know the answer, let me know in the comments. Perhaps it is an original penitentiary structure after all. Here is grave plot 991. In 1933, a prisoner named Suk Sias was buried here. Years and years later, after quite the battle, their family actually disinterred him and moved his body to be with the rest of his family. So, out of all of these graves, this is the only one that is known for a fact to have been actually removed. So the gravestone remains, but the remains of Suk Sias are no longer buried here. And here, in grave number 3237, lies Harold Gordon McMaster, who is the last known person buried here, having died in 1968. Again, there's some people walking by because this is just alongside of this nice dog walking path for this residential area. My, oh my, how a place can change. But I am thrilled. I think it's a miracle that this gravesite was never altered or built over. They must have known when they were constructing this area about this place. They appear to have left it alone fairly deliberately. As you'll notice, private property continues up to every gate of this. And I don't know if the city said you're not allowed to build over this, or if the corporation that was building here decided to just leave this space be, but I am so glad that they did. The people lying here deserve it, as what they did not deserve was to be buried here for such crimes as protesting or, as I said, stealing socks. There are believed to be 4 completely unmarked graves here. 2 of those unmarked graves belong to Herman Wilson and Joseph Smith. They, in 1912, attempted to break out when they were confronted by a guard, who they then killed. Now, one of them died in there during the conflict, but Joseph did not. He was sentenced to death. And perhaps because it was easier to just keep him here at the BC Penitentiary, but probably to serve as an example to the other inmates. In January of 1913, he became the only person ever executed here at the penitentiary. He was hanged, allegedly for all to see. And his body now lays somewhere in here in a completely unmarked grave, as does his accomplice, who died during the battle. Wow, I just learned of why there are so few bodies here. I was thinking, in the 102-year history of the penitentiary, it's amazing that there's only a couple of dozen people buried here on site, but these are the graves of people who were not requested by their families. So, upon the death of a prisoner, they likely would have contacted the families of the dead, who would then take the remains and have them buried. But this is a prison for the select few who no family members came to pick them up at all, and the BC Pen was forced to inter them themselves. which adds just another level of sadness to where I am currently sitting. Now, the reasons for their families not collecting their remains, there are a few of them that have been hypothesized over the years, the most common one being that, well, it was an extremely embarrassing thing to have a convict in the family, especially back then. And a lot of people just wanted to sweep it under the rug and never acknowledge that it had happened at all. So these unmarked graves are people who were forgotten and ignored by all, even their own families. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Like I said, this has been a project I've wanted to do for a long time. My name is Graham Strang. For those of you who don't know, I'm also a professional musician. That is the main purpose of this vlog, is to chronicle my life day by day as a professional musician. And you can check out the description for a full list of all my upcoming concert dates. I do lots of dates around the Lower Mainland and throughout Western Canada as well when I do tour. And also in the description you can find links to where my music can be bought or streamed online. Yeah, like this video if you liked what you saw today. I certainly enjoyed this exploration. And yeah, if you've been enjoying my videos, you can subscribe to my channel. I always appreciate it. And yeah, that's about it. You can also ring the notification bell if you want to be notified every time I upload a new video, which should be tomorrow and most days for the foreseeable future, as this is a daily vlog. Thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll catch you again with another new episode tomorrow. See you then.